Ever been in a situation where you felt like, I don't know, you were just speaking a different language than the person across from you?
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe you've got this fantastic idea, but getting others to actually see it your way feels like a real uphill battle.
Yeah, that's a common one.
It's such a fundamental part of, well, being human, right? Trying to connect and influence. Today, we're diving deep into a source that's been helping people with exactly these challenges for, gosh, decades now.
That's right. We've been exploring How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Came out way back in 1936, and Carnegie's work was, well, pretty groundbreaking at the time. It really established him as a key figure in personal business skills, motivation, that kind of thing.
And his insights still feel so relevant.
They really do. They continue to resonate.
Absolutely. So our goal today, our mission, if you like, is to really pull out the core wisdom from this book. We want to see how these principles, which might seem a bit old-fashioned on the surface, still offer incredibly useful, actionable strategies for, our interactions today.
And Carnegie structured the book really thoughtfully. He covers fundamental techniques for handling people, then ways to actually make people like you, methods for persuasion winning people to your way of thinking, and finally, principles of leadership.
Yeah, a lot there. We're going to try and touch on some of the most impactful ideas from each of those areas. Okay, so let's get started. Let's unpack some of those fundamental ways of handling people first.
Okay, so the very first principle Carnegie emphasizes is avoiding criticism, condemnation, and complaints.
Sounds simple enough.
It does sound straightforward, but when you actually stop and think about it, it's a really profound insight into human psychology. He uses this quite striking example of Two Gun Crowley.
The gangster.
Yeah, the notorious criminal who, even as the police were closing in, arresting him, he genuinely believed he had a kind heart, didn't see himself as a killer at all.
Wow. That really makes you think, doesn't it? Even someone society views as, well, a villain, saw himself in this positive light. It just highlights this basic human thing. We're all kind of the heroes of our own story, so when we jump in and criticize someone...
You immediately put them on the defensive.
Right. What's the underlying psychology there? Why do we react so badly to criticism?
Well, what's fascinating here is this inherent bias we all have. It's called a self-serving bias. Basically, we tend to attribute our successes to ourselves, our skills, our effort, but our failures...
It's someone else's fault or bad luck.
Exactly. External factors. So criticism, especially when it feels unfair or it attacks our sense of who we are, it's rarely taken well because it just clashes with this fundamental need we have to see ourselves in a positive way.
That makes perfect sense. So instead of criticism, Carnegie suggests
What?
the power of appreciation.
Honest and sincere appreciation. That's the key. He talks about Charles Schwab, the steel tycoon.
Right.
Schwab believed his ability to inspire enthusiasm through appreciation and encouragement was his greatest asset. He was apparently known for his lavish praise and was really reluctant to find fault.
Why is that appreciation so much more effective, do you think?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, appreciation taps into that need we all have for validation, for recognition. It builds a positive emotional connection. It makes people more receptive, more willing to cooperate.
Whereas criticism just...
shuts down communication, often. Breeds resentment. Think about that example Carnegie gives of Pamela Dunham and the janitor who wasn't doing a great job.
Yeah, I remember that.
More criticism wasn't working. But when she started offering sincere praise for the small things he did do well, his performance completely turned around.
It's a really powerful demonstration, isn't it? How positive reinforcement can just be so much more effective than the negative stick approach.
Definitely.
Okay, so that leads us nicely into the third fundamental principle he talks about, arousing in the other person an eager want.
Yes, and what's crucial here is shifting your focus. It's not about what you want. It's about figuring out what the other person desires. Carnegie quotes Professor Overstreet, who put it really well. He said, first, arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way.
It's the difference between pushing someone and pulling them, maybe.
Exactly. It's about tapping into their motivations, not just imposing yours.
Okay, so instead of trying to force someone or nag them, you're trying to connect with what they already want. Can you give us a practical example of how this works?
Well, think about the father whose young son kept getting his tricycle stolen or pushed off it by an older bully.
Right.
Nagging the bully, telling him off, it didn't work. But then the father reframed it. He appealed to the bully's sense of importance. He said something like, My little boy needs the exercise. Could you maybe watch him, make sure he's okay? He made the bully feel needed, important.
And the problem stopped.
The problem resolved itself. Because the bully's eager want in that moment was probably to feel important, maybe a bit superior. The father tapped into that.
Right. It's about seeing it from their angle and framing your request or the situation in a way that benefits them, even if it's just emotionally. Like that other story, the little girl who wouldn't eat her cereal.
Until she got to make it herself.
Exactly. Suddenly, her desire to be involved, to feel capable, turned this, boring breakfast into something positive.
Perfect example.
Okay, great. So those are some fundamentals. Now let's move into how we can actually, make people like us more, build that rapport.
Okay, the first principle here is all about becoming genuinely interested in other people. And the emphasis is on genuinely. It's not about faking it. It's about truly being curious, engaged.
Like that editor Carnegie mentions.
Yeah, the hard-boiled editor advising aspiring fiction writers. He said the key to success was simply to be interested in people.
Why is that genuine interest so magnetic, do you think?
I think it's because it makes people feel seen, valued. When someone shows real interest in you, not just superficial stuff, you feel like you matter. Carnegie shares that story about the magician Howard Thurston.
Oh, yeah, the famous magician.
Right. He apparently attributed his huge success not just to his illusions, but to the fact that he took a sincere interest in basically everyone he met. From the audience members to the stagehands, he made them feel important.
And that genuine interest, it often shows up in a really simple but incredibly powerful way.
Yeah.
A smile. That's the second principle, right?
Exactly. Charles Schwab, again, he famously believed his smile was worth $1 million.
$1 million smile. What's the psychology behind why a simple smile has such an impact?
Well, a genuine smile is a universal nonverbal cue. It signals warmth, friendliness, approachability. It literally triggers positive emotions in other people, makes them feel more comfortable, more connected to you.
It's like that story about the vet's waiting room.
Yeah, that tense atmosphere, everyone worried about their pets, and then a baby just smiles.
Then the whole mood changes.
Instantly diffuse. It's almost primal, as you said.
Yeah.
But again, the key word there is genuine. Professor McConnell's research seemed to back this up. People who smile authentically were found to be more effective, whether in management, teaching, whatever. There's a real difference between a forced, plastered-on smile and one that actually reflects genuine warmth inside.
It makes sense. You can usually tell.
You can.
Yeah.
And think about William B. Steinhardt's experience, the guy who realized he'd been a grouch to his wife for years. When he consciously started smiling at her more,
It changed their relationship.
significantly improved it. It highlights how these small, consistent gestures can really build connection over time.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the third principle in making people like you. Remembering a person's name. Carnegie really emphasizes this, calls a person's name the sweetest, most important sound in any language to that person. Why does this seemingly small detail carry so much weight?
Well, think about it. Maybe from an evolutionary or just a deep psychological perspective, our names are so tied to our identity, our sense of self. When someone remembers our name and uses it, it validates our existence, makes us feel recognized as an individual.
It feels personal.
Exactly. It shows you've paid attention. The tragic story of Jim Farley, the politician known for remembering thousands of names whose death was so widely mourned, really underscores this point. People felt he genuinely knew them.
And Andrew Carnegie, the other Carnegie, made it a point to know his workers' first names.
Right. Imagine the loyalty that fostered. Even in big corporations, Benton Love, another businessman Carnegie quotes, stressed how vital names were for maintaining a human touch.
It just shows a level of care and attention that people really deeply appreciate. That story about Millie Esposito's son after she really truly listened to him for once.
And he just said, "Mom, I know that you love me very much."
Yeah. It just speaks volumes, doesn't it? The power of making someone feel heard, remembered, seen. Okay, so we've laid some groundwork for positive interactions, building rapport. Now, how do we actually win people over to our way of thinking? Persuasion time.
Right. And the first principle here might surprise some people. Avoid arguments.
Don't argue. But how do you convince someone then?
Well, as Carnegie wisely points out, arguments rarely change minds. Think about your own experience. Do you usually walk away from a heated argument thinking, wow, they were right, I was completely wrong?
Rarely. Usually I just feel more convinced I was right, even if I wasn't.
Exactly. Arguments typically just leave everyone feeling more entrenched in their original positions, and often they breed resentment too. He shares the story of Patrick J. O'Hare, a salesman who started out being really combative.
And wasn't very successful.
No. But then he adopted a more diplomatic, less argumentative approach, and his success soared. Even thousands of years ago, King Akhtoy of Egypt apparently advised, "Be diplomatic. It will help you gain your point."
So what's the key insight there? Why are arguments so unproductive, really?
I think it's because our ego gets involved, doesn't it? When we argue, we become more focused on being right, on winning, than on actually finding common ground or understanding the other person's perspective.
Yeah, it creates that win-lose dynamic where ultimately nobody really wins.
Precisely. And the second principle builds right on this. Show respect for the other person's opinions and never say, "You're wrong."
Ooh, that feels counterintuitive sometimes, doesn't it? What if they are wrong?
It does, but think about how you feel when someone just flat out tells you you're wrong.
Defensive, immediately.
Right. It's instantly dismissive, puts you on the back foot. Carnegie's own story about the park ranger and his dog Rex in Forest Park that illustrates this beautifully.
Remind me.
He was walking his dog off leash. The ranger caught him, and Carnegie could have argued because technically the dog wasn't harming anyone. But instead, he immediately admitted the ranger might be right, acknowledged his perspective, basically said, "Okay, you caught me."
And the ranger softened.
Completely. Diffused the whole situation. The ranger ended up being quite reasonable because Carnegie didn't attack his authority or opinion directly.
It's about preserving their pride, maybe. Avoiding that direct confrontation. So instead of "you're wrong," maybe something like, that's an interesting way to look at it. Or, "I see your point, though I might see it a little differently."
Exactly. It opens up a dialogue instead of shutting it down. And that flows naturally into the third principle here. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. There's a surprising amount of power in doing that.
Yeah. How so?
Well, taking ownership of your mistakes completely disarms the other person. It catches them off guard in a good way. It shows humility, integrity. Carnegie tells about a time he made a mistake on a drawing for a client.
Instead of making excuses.
He immediately called the client, admitted the error, even criticized himself before the client could. And the client's reaction was amazing. He actually started defending Carnegie, downplaying the mistake.
It completely flips the script, doesn't it?
It really does. By being willing to be vulnerable, admit fault, you often build more trust and rapport than if you tried to bluff your way through. Carnegie quotes that old proverb, "By fighting, you never get enough, but by yielding, you get more than you expected."
That's a good one. Okay, let's shift gears slightly now. Let's turn our attention to leadership. How can we guide and influence people effectively, without causing offense or resentment?
Right. And the first principle of leadership Carnegie outlines is to begin with praise and honest appreciation. We've heard that before, but here's the caution.
It needs to be genuine.
It really needs to be genuine. He warns about the classic criticism sandwich. Praise, then criticism, then more praise.
Yeah, that often feels manipulative, like the praise is just the setup for the bad news.
Exactly. It can totally backfire. People see right through it. So what's a more effective way to offer constructive feedback then?
Well, I think, like you said, focusing on specific behaviors or actions rather than making general negative comments about the person. And as the second principle suggests, maybe calling attention to people's mistakes indirectly can be much more effective sometimes.
Yes. Asking questions instead of giving direct orders or accusations. This encourages self-discovery, gives the person a sense of ownership over the solution. Carnegie uses that great example of Charles Schwab, again, dealing with a mill foreman whose team wasn't meeting production goals.
What did Schwab do? He didn't just yell at him.
No. Instead of reprimanding him directly, Schwab apparently just asked questions like, "Why do you think it is that the furnaces under your supervision aren't producing more?" Open-ended questions.
So it guided the foreman to identify the issues himself.
Exactly. And come up with his own solutions, which is much more motivating.
Yeah, it empowers the person to take responsibility and find their own way forward. Much better in the long run. And the third leadership principle you mentioned, talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. That feels like a powerful way to build empathy.
It really is. Leading by example, showing you're not perfect either, it creates a more relatable, less intimidating dynamic. Carnegie reflects on how he used to be impatient with his young niece, Josephine.
Right.
And then he remembered his own youthful shortcomings, his own mistakes at her age, and it helped him approach her with much more understanding and patience. He also mentions Prince Bernhard von Bülow in Germany, how he'd subtly correct Kaiser Wilhelm II.
How did he do that? You can't exactly criticize the Kaiser directly.
No. So von Bülow would apparently start by praising the Kaiser effusively, then very gently, almost casually, mention his own similar minor mistake in the past, and then sort of steer the conversation toward the point he wanted to make about the Kaiser's action. It softened the blow, made the feedback much more palatable.
Clever. Very diplomatic. So, wow, we've really journeyed through a wealth of insightful principles today. From, fundamental human interactions right through to leadership strategies. What's striking to me is how consistently these ideas all seem to emphasize empathy, understanding, and genuinely valuing other people.
Exactly. That's the core thread, isn't it? These principles, they might seem straightforward, maybe even common sense on the surface, but they offer really profound insights into effective communication, into building strong relationships. And it's important to stress, this isn't about manipulation.
No, it feels more about fostering mutual respect.
Exactly. Mutual respect and understanding. By really focusing on the other person's perspective, offering that sincere appreciation, avoiding unnecessary conflict, leading with a bit of humility, we can significantly enhance our ability to connect with people and, yes, to influence them positively.
And these feel so universally applicable, too. Like they'd work across different cultures, different situations.
I think so. They tap into something pretty fundamental about human nature, which is probably why they've endured for so long.
Yeah.
It speaks to their power.
Absolutely. So for you, our listener, always seeking that actionable knowledge, those valuable aha moments, Dale Carnegie's wisdom really does provide exactly that, doesn't it?
It really does.
So maybe here's a final thought for you to consider. Which one of these principles we've talked about today resonates most strongly with, say, a current relationship challenge you're facing? Or maybe a goal you have? Perhaps just pick one. Just one. Maybe it's the power of genuine appreciation or the strategy of avoiding arguments and consciously try to apply it in your very next interaction. See what happens.
Yeah, just experiment with one.
And then maybe think about the potential ripple effect. What if you started consistently incorporating these kinds of people-centric approaches into, well, all aspects of your life? What kind of positive changes might you begin to see? Something to think about.